This is Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee meeting on this August 28th. And we are operating under special COVID laws as allowed under the state executive order, which means we're using Zoom. And there's a whole procedure. When we get to public comment, we'll go over that. Does the clerk have any other comment about how we're operating the meeting?
No, just please, directors, if you have to leave at any point, please email me and I can reflect that in the minutes.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order and we will get a roll call vote for people being present.
Thank you. Chair Miller.
Present.
Vice Chair Smith.
Here.
Gibbons.
Here.
Sinks.
Aye.
Thank you. And Abe Koga is absent this morning.
Okay, perfect. At this point, we will check with the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on matters not listed on the agenda? If you wish to do so, indicate that by raising your virtual hand. If you are a call-in, then you can do that by pressing *9. Seeing no members of the public waving their virtual hands at me, we will move on to our agenda. First up is our consent calendar, which has 3 items. Nancy.
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, is there any comment or discussion on it? Let me check with the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on the consent calendar? If you wish to do so, please indicate that by raising your virtual hand. Seeing none, I will come back. Any final comments from the board? We could get a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Chair Miller.
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith.
Aye.
Gibbons.
Aye.
Sinks.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Abe Koga absent. And I would like to call out that this means that the November and December executive committee meetings have been rescheduled to November 23rd at 11 a.m.
Excellent. Okay, so regular calendar. First up is our CEO update.
Hi, Chair Miller, members of the exec committee. I'm going to have Andrea post up a short kind of presentation. So I'm going to go through a few items and we'll end with a short update from Ian on the blackout. I figure that that's going to have some Q&A, so I'll leave that to the last. So next slide, please. So I want to just really hear some upcoming board items of note. Obviously, the budget adoption is the big one for the September meeting. We will be doing pretty much what you talked about at the August board meeting, but note that there has been the blackouts that has happened since then. So we'll be talking to you about a few changes in the budget around that. Other than that, it's just minor changes that we'll be providing. So it's going to be a pretty condensed board report for the budget adoption. September and October 2020, I'll be bringing to the board. One is in September, just an update on the renewable power prepay. And in December, I'll be bringing to you information and an action item related to the creation of a super JPA for long duration storage. Could you go to the next slide, please? I'll talk a little bit more about each of these items. So in the renewable power prepay, just to summarize, essentially power that is renewable power that we prepay for, we can essentially buy at a discount. And it has to do with interest rates between tax exempt and taxable. It takes quite a bit of time to just establish the structure that will allow us to transact. At this point in time, interest rates are not suitable, but when they are suitable, we can act immediately if we have the structure in place. So it takes about 6 months or so to put it in place. We are taking 2 separate actions. One, we are one of the founding members along with 3 other CCAs of a bond conduit JPA. Mirroring Clean Energy is taking the lead on that. East Bay and us are working on a prepaid transaction, and we're working this right now. So I'll be bringing you some of the foundational documents, et cetera, and most of the costs associated with this will be paid if and when we get a deal. So it's a pretty, we have to pay the professionals, there's all kinds of lawyers, analysts that we have to pay to get all the structure done. So that's coming up in September and October, and we will be briefing the finance committee again on this and after the board meeting in September. Item B is creating a super JPA, and 9 CCAs are cost sharing this effort right now. Monterey and us are taking the lead on putting this together. We have 2 tracks. One is actually create the JPA, and we have 9 CCAs that are cost sharing that effort. We have also put out an RFI for long duration storage. Results came in July, and an RFO is going to be issued in mid-September. We expect the transaction will be ready somewhere in Q1, Q2 latest of 2021, but we need to have the JPA together so we can have an entity that's actually negotiating with the counterparty. On the RFO, we have 11 entities, CCAs interested in this. And then of course, budget, you know the details. Any questions on upcoming vote items? This is mostly for you.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a
Rod?
question.
Please.
If there's a lot of costs in establishing a renewable power prepay option, might it be better for us to have that transacted by the super JPA rather than us?
No, no.
Merely as a cost sharing
No.
arrangement.
No, we're going to pay this one way or the other. I see what you're saying about doing it with 9, but the super JPA is going to be focused purely on transactions. This bond conduit is just for the prepay. It's a financial JPA, which really is not going to have any staff or anything like that. So the super JPA will have a lot more people involved. And I think it works for SVCE to be one of the early members for the prepay. There's also a limited amount of prepay capacity out in the market. And we have 3 CCAs who are leading this, us and 2 others who are really have taken a lot of actions, and we're the first ones out of the gate. So if we open it up to 9, our benefits could be diluted also.
As might our risks.
No, the risks are exactly the same. The bond prepay CCA, essentially, I would say it's, I hesitate to say no risk, but essentially the risk is we'll go back to our existing cost. So it's either you get a discount, and if a counterparty defaults, you just go back to your existing contract. So that's
Well,
the risk.
I mean, okay, I would express the risk perhaps this way. It's a complex financial transaction with another finger in the pie. And I'll grant you that we are basically transferring money from the federal treasury to ours, perhaps. But you know, there with another finger in the pie, things can, another financial party at interest, things can get more complicated.
Yeah, just a reminder on the timeline, right? All that we're doing now is setting up the structure so that if the world changes, and our Federal Reserve is telling us it's not going to, by the way, anytime soon, if the world changes, then we're in a position to act. And so all we're doing right now is setting up so we can be ready. And I will point out the other part is sometimes the windows of opportunity on this are measured in weeks or very, very few months. So you wouldn't have time to do all this work later.
Yeah, I know. Something about this that rubs me the wrong way is my problem and not ours. I see rationally why it makes sense.
A future board will sort these details out. We're just getting them ready.
I understand. It's just, you know, now we got a Wall Street finger in a pie, and what could go wrong? So it's, I know we both benefit. I know effectively, right? We both benefit. So my
Didn't I see you at the
rational
rally?
self is going hooray, and my irrational self is going,
Didn't I see you at the rally, Rod, going two more terms? Reference to Donald Trump saying he needs a third term. Liz, please go ahead.
Jeez. Oh, man.
So I actually would reinforce the comment you just made, is the Fed made an announcement yesterday, which might slow this power prepay option down, which means that if and when it comes available, we do want to be prepared to move quickly. And I have a slightly different take on it than Rod, which is basically that the long-term JPA is really, I think Garish said, as a purchasing vehicle, whereas this power prepay is really based on our financial solvency. And one of the reasons that we got the whole Moody's rating and other things, it puts us in a very good position to help our own finances and not get caught up in the finances of other groups.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm done.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll just end with, there are very few ways where we can have a structural advantage on cost. And this is one of those. And so it's being ready to act, and there's limited capacity in the market at this point. We fully expect after we act on this, along with one or two other CCAs, there will be a lot more people coming into the market to do this.
And then it'll be harder because, as you say, the capacity of the market won't be able to serve all of them.
No, it may increase. It's just at this point,
Oh, I see. Okay.
we have limited capacity. Right now in the country, there have been about 100 prepay options, power prepay options that have been transacted, but not renewable power prepay. So this would be one of the first renewable power prepay options that have been
And
transacted.
your calculation is by going earlier, we may get better terms than people that come late. CCAs that come.
Right. Even the counterparties we are dealing with right now, the ones that have done quite a few transactions, they will be, we'll probably get a better price. But I also think, Rod, this is not the last deal we'll be doing on prepay, right? So right now we are thinking of putting maybe 10% of our portfolio into the prepay pot.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll do that. And then we'll have the ability to run more prepays in the future.
It's kind of like
Okay, and-
mortgage rates too, Rod. You think you got a good rate, but you never know what's going to happen in a couple more weeks. And so,
So I'm just kind of think of this as a great flexibility option when things, economic conditions allow. And I guess the other thing is, does PG&E have the option of taking advantage of this sort of thing?
No, it's only open to public agencies.
see,
Well,
Rod,
then.
you can smile about that. An
Yes,
advantage over PG&E. What could be better?
a structural advantage.
Yeah. So both these items, A and B, are both big deals, not just for us at SVCE, but even when we talk to the CPUC, when we talk to the legislature, we are acting in a way to reduce our costs for our customers. And we are also working with multiple CCAs to leverage economies of scale. So this is also, part of just the evolution and maturation of CCAs in general. And we'll also be in a good place. Again, we can't predict all this stuff, but even with the blackouts, right? So we'll get to, well, what about long duration storage? Will that help with blackouts? Or just multiple CCAs coming in to do large transactions for capacity. So these two are very strategic also. They'll have strategic value for us going into the future.
Okay, enough on the
Thank
prepay.
you. Yes.
Seeing no other questions, let's.
So
We're going to have
next
a
slide.
public speak, but let's finish all of this.
Yes, perfect.
Remember the public.
Thank you. So just some other updates. Update on hiring our new CFO. At the September meeting, you'll see that we're going to amend Don Rhodes' agreement. I grossly underestimated the R's. When we talked to consultant initially, the management partners had just said, yeah, let's just budget at 20 hours a week. Just with Moody's and the budget, it was just incorrect. I shouldn't have done that. So now we're going to budget more at like a 35 hours a week level. And so that'll show up on your consent calendar. Net costs are very small, given that we are saving on Don Eckert's salary. The job has been posted. All of you have received an email from the recruiter on that, I believe. And please, reach out to your contacts. The close date is September 10th. And we are scheduling, we've already kind of have some target dates for interviews. Next item is MCE. Just 2 days ago, or was it yesterday morning? I think yesterday, actually. They've been upgraded by Fitch from BBB to BBB+. One of the major items that Fitch talked about in terms of their upgrade was their days cash on hand going from about, I think it went from about 80 days to about 150 days or so. So there was a remarkable 160 days, so a remarkable improvement in MCE's standing on cash. So they've been upgraded, which is good to know just from a CCA and rating agency standpoint that we have multiple rating agencies working with us and they have changed the rating. So the upgrade is really good news for
Yeah,
all
and
of us.
if they like their 150 days, they gotta love us.
That's exactly right. Yep. If there are no questions on this, I'll go to the next slide, which is update on the blackout. So we had a blackout August 14th and 15th. These were rolling outages. And there were no customers in Santa Clara County that were called on the rolling outages. Pam and her group sent out a number of, basically in terms of media and communication, I believe kept you informed on what was going on. And also thank you all very much for leveraging your social media presence because we needed conservation from all our customers. And thank you all for doing that. There's going to be an investigation that the governor ordered. The scope is TBD. At Cal CCA, we have been talking about actions we'll be taking. So this is all a work in progress. Executive committee, we'll keep you updated. There are more questions than answers. But I'd say just some takeaways, big picture are, well, we'll come back to that. I'm sure you'll have questions. I want to hand it over to Ian to provide a verbal update on what happened on those 2 days.
Sure. Thanks, Krish. Again, we don't want to speculate. What I'm going to tell you is what we know exactly. And again, we're going to leave this investigation up to the state and to figure out what the autopsy looks like for these last 10 days. But in terms of SVCE, we were well positioned. Again, we always act accordingly to our risk policy management in terms of our hedges. And going into the event, we were at 102% hedged for peak and 98% hedged for off-peak, which is where within our tolerance bands for our risk policy management. And even with that, our load forecasts were, we were planning forecast, and our loads were significantly higher than our planning forecasts. And just to give you some relevance in terms of data points, our peak load for SVCE was 858 megawatts back in June last year when I first started. And during this heat wave, with our most recent data, we got up to 796 megawatts. So it's about 7% decline from our peak from June. So it's kind of an interesting data point looking at COVID, and that's how we've kind of used our forecasts. Even though it was just as hot in the last 10 days as it was in June, our peak load was about 7% lower. So that's a good data point. In terms of the state, when we look at how much capacity was online during this time, and again, this is just from the CPUC NQC report, which is the available capacity, there was 46,000 megawatts available for capacity for August. That was the planning target. And on the 14th, our peak load was 46,268. So In a perfect planning world, for our in-state resources, we were short. But that planning world, in reality, you have derates due to outages of gas plants that go out. You have derates of what's happening with the current hydro availability. You have variability with wind. You have real-time what's happening on the grid. So that was an issue. And I think in terms of ramping constraints, everyone knows we have the belly of the duck, and we know what that ramping constraint looks like during the day. And there may have been a failure on how much in-state flexible ramping we had to make sure we could meet that ramp, and that'll be investigated. They'll also look at operating reserves. Where was the state in terms of, as these emergencies were being called, where were the operating reserves? And then finally, the coincidental heat around the entire system of the West. Temperatures are 10 to 20 degrees above average. So if you look at the Pacific Northwest, California, and the Desert Southwest, think of that as one region. All of these power prices are kind of interrelated, and we rely heavily on imports. And as other regions have peak demand at 10 to 20 degrees higher, they have fewer available imports for the state of California. So that's kind of the general picture. Again, we don't want to get into speculation, but that's where SVCE was positioned both from a hedging perspective. The good news on an RA perspective, from a reliability perspective, we're actually long. CAISO called a CPM for more capacity for the system. SVCE was actually long with its capacity needs for the month of August, which is great. We're also long flexible capacity, which is also good. Again, we were contributing more than we needed to during this time. So with that, I can take some questions, and happy to tell you what we know.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody fear that this will be held against us? Yeah. Okay. Grish, there was an economic impact to us too.
Yeah, so I think we'll discuss this with our risk oversight committee on Monday, so we can get into more details on that during the risk oversight committee. As you said, some of the data is still coming in even for us, and we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Okay, anything else from the CEO report?
No, just one other thing is like, sorry, still on this. Power prices have gone up. The whole forward curve has gone up, right? So because of this volatility, we're not changing our power forecast projections for the budget. We believe things will settle down, and we have reserves, and we'll come back to you in mid-year if it's needed. So.
Yeah, Howard, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Nancy. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you did mention, concerns. I have a kind of a context question, or speculative context, I guess. If the ramp up on the duck curve was involved, would you speculate about whether it's a structural issue or a transition to a new kind of model issue? If you see what I mean, like, is it?
Yeah, I think it's both.
Planning, yeah, if planning could have mitigated it, that would be interesting to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think my speculation is yes. So structurally, the way the CAISO and the PUC and the load serving entities interact on how RA is put together, there are lots of handoffs between the agencies. I do think the weather pattern may have been kind of unique. So I think there will be recommendations on planning. There should be recommendations on organizational structure and who is accountable. For example, who is accountable for reliability on that day? There was finger pointing between two of the energy agencies, which basically says, okay, it's not clear who's in charge. So I think there will be some recommendations on that. Another thing, just from our perspective as SVCE, looking at where we're headed, I can't see us moving forward without contracting for gas supply, for capacity. You just can't keep the system reliable for the next 10 to 15 years without having gas units support this kind of ramp. Now, the use of gas units can be mitigated through demand response, through batteries, but you also have to balance cost over here. So we will be bringing up these issues to you as a board. And, the CCAs in the state, we're all going to be discussing that. Nancy, I hope that answers your question.
It answered part of the question.
Sorry, give me the remaining part of it.
The remaining part of it was you addressed, I think, some of the transitional issues that could be addressed by clearer roles and responsibilities and procedures, that kind of thing. But you didn't necessarily speak to some of the more structural concerns. I guess maybe you did with the gas being needed. So, okay. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that.
So from a physical standpoint, we need to have more capacity on the system, and gas is pretty much the only thing that is available at scale. And the reason I'm bringing it to your attention is because of what our mission is and what we've talked about over the last several years. So I think it'll have to be some kind of hybrid of contracting for gas capacity, and at the same time, also contracting for some very targeted storage. The CPUC will be getting into another procurement phase to make sure that there is enough capacity. And it would really surprise me if it's not a combination of gas units and batteries.
So might I ask a little more about this?
Sure, go ahead.
And I have,
Thank you, Chair. I know, there has been some gas through system power that we procure and are charged for. And that, for us, right, has worked in the past to supplement our contracts. And I think we've even proposed as CCAs that kind of procurement be centralized. Has there been any effort in this regard, or do you think we'll all be assigned our gas quota to go procure?
That's
I mean,
a
it seems
TBD.
like if we're trying to wean ourselves off of it over a long period of time, it might make sense for some central entity to worry about procuring it. But
It's a great, I think those are definitely in the policy mix, Rod, as to what the structure of that, where that responsibility should lie. Is it the central procurement entity as proposed? Should it be what we have proposed, which is the residual central reliability authority? I think these will, should the CAISO take on more of a role in actually procuring longer term supply? They do have the ability through what they call RMR contracts, reliability must run, to contract for long-term at cost with gas units. So I think centralizing more of that makes sense, but we don't have, it'll be that plus more changes. Yep.
yeah, and I mean, the other thing that occurs is you have a pretty complex mix here. You have the CEC that has something to say about what's going on. You have CAISO that's trying to schedule and also worry about long-term adequacy. You have the CPUC that has its finger in so many different enterprises in the state. And, I would also hope through this process that perhaps there's some simplification. So maybe the CPUC doesn't have to, maybe the CAISO takes this responsibility largely, and the CPUC can be freed up to worry about water,
Yeah.
other such things. But who knows?
Yeah. From your perspective as a board, I think giving us some broad direction like what you're talking about, which we have in our legislative and regulatory platform, but also resourcing us at SVCE and through SVCE, through CalCCA, to advance these ideas. And you've done that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I thank you, because I think that whenever people get upset and they think maybe we're not working together to perform well, I think there's then an opportunity to change how we're doing business. And as responsible parties in this mix, I think we have every right to put ideas forward to further the governor's goals of improving resiliency.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep. I know they came out originally, or they started off by saying it was because of renewable energy, which in some broad sense may be true, but it almost felt like they were trying to blame us. Liz, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Girish if there was some update on time of use transition in October. We haven't talked about that much, and I'm just curious, not now, but maybe at the board meeting as part of your update.
Yeah, it did get delayed, so we probably should make sure everybody knows.
I
Yes.
didn't know that.
I'll update you at the board meeting. I'll just leave you with the last thing that we are going to have, and 3 entities have developed an op-ed, SVCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, and the City of San Jose, which should be published next week, and dealing with this and talking about the point that Howard just brought up, which is clean energy is not the problem. Climate change and what we can do to address it, we need to continue to have our foot on the pedal in this transformation. And we're going to, Susan Ellenberg on our board is one of the co-authors of that op-ed.
Yeah. So I'll send you some articles from my cousin, who's an attorney on the East Coast, about this.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are 2 members of the public that want to comment on our CEO report. If we can bring them in, or am I facilitating that in this meeting?
We can go ahead and do that for you. Let's start with Mr. Carney.
Hi, thank you. Another interesting morning with all of you. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the power prepay and then make a comment or two. So I'm very excited that there's a possibility of reducing the cost of the electricity that SVCE buys by 5 to 7%. I'd be excited even if it were just a 1 to 2% delta, and even though it may only initially apply to 10% of the procurement. SVCE's low generation rate is a very strong advantage to the organization. I recently compared some of SVCE's stats to the other CCAs in Northern California, and SVCE's gen rate is about 12% below Sonoma Clean Powers and about 10% below Marin Clean Energies. And because of their high cost of procuring energy, both Sonoma and Marin are charging their customers more than PG&E does. So I know that the board has always been very worried when the prospect of not being able to underprice PG&E has come to the fore, and those 2 agencies are in that soup and have been in it for, I believe, more than a year each. So one of my questions is, what are the conditions that would allow the power prepay to begin to generate savings on the cost of electricity? It would be good to know more specifically what those conditions are, so the executive committee and board and public can try to understand how likely they are to occur in the near future.
Bruce, it's just quickly, that's all about interest rates, and it's the spread between municipal and commercial, and they leverage the 2.
Good to know, as would perhaps a historical graph showing how those two rates have trended over time, and possibly even a projection of where they might be going. So that's very valuable context to have. Could you, Andrea, could you put the slide back up that had the power prepay, just to refresh my memory? Is that going to be possible, Andrea? I can't.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm gonna pull it up. Just
So Bruce, the bottom line on the power prepay for us right now, and it's kind of what I was saying to Rod, we're going to spend the next couple quarters getting ready, building the legal framework and structure internally, and then we have to wait for some pretty big changes in the way the interest rates are. And like Liz and I noted, the Federal Reserve is saying, look, we're going to just keep them at zero until we can get inflation above 2%, which may be a very long time from now. So
Understand.
it's going to be a future board and a future set of decision makers that are going to have to actually work their way through this.
Well, the good thing is members of the public have no term limits, so I hope to be part of that conversation whenever it happens.
Well, that's all I'm saying is be ready a year from now.
So another question about that is, what's the duration of the prepayment? So if somebody's putting together a new solar plant and the goal is to lock that up for 20 years, do you prepay for the whole 20 years all at once, or in 5-year increments that are renewable? What does that look like? I'd be interested in that level of detail. And the last question on this slide is, how long is long-term storage? I'm familiar with using batteries to smooth out daily peaks and valleys in the duck curve, but what does long-term mean in this context?
Chair Miller, if you wouldn't mind, I'll give a very short answer on this. Okay. Bruce, on the prepay, let's just have a separate meeting. We've updated the finance committee and we will update the finance committee. We have answers to all the questions you have, but it's going to take a little longer to explain. So we'll set up a separate meeting with you to go through that. As far as long duration storage, as per the, it's 8 hours or more, which is what's defined by the PUC for long duration storage. In their, in one of the plans that was going to get to 38 million tons by 2030, I believe it was 12 hours. The RFI asked for 8 hours or longer.
Thank you.
We good, Bruce?
Just one final comment in the Colombo style. The blackouts definitely are causing consternation among some people in the environmental community. I got an email from Michael Clausen, the former executive director of Actera, who's about as knowledgeable in green as anybody could be, essentially asking, well, does this we need to dial back on the transition to clean energy? And my response to him was basically that I thought that much of it had to do with a mispricing of peak hour energy, which will get solved early next year, as Liz alluded to. There's also been some things that I've read that said that the CAISO pulled the trigger on the alerts sooner than they should have, when they still had more reserves than their policy would have said was time to begin rolling blackouts. But yes, there's definitely going to be pushback in Los Altos and Sunnyvale about the REACH code going to an all-electric building as a result of this experience.
Yeah, it's going to be used against us. Okay, thank you, Bruce. We have one more public speaker.
all right, Mr. Tony Yulo.
Hey guys, we really appreciated Pamela sending out messaging that we could use to encourage the members of our community to conserve energy during the peak hours. I'm wondering if there's some way of knowing how responsible our collective customers were in responding to that request. And also wondering if there's a way for us to look city by city and kind of find out which cities, really pushed the message out and which cities didn't, and see if there's any difference in the patterns of energy consumption amongst the cities and the potential response. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Tony. We'll take that in and discuss it internally, staff, and get back to you. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I think that's all of our public speakers. Does anybody have any final thoughts on the CEO report? There was a lot there.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm very curious about Bruce's finding that our cost is lower, and I wonder if Girish might opine on what makes that so. Is it our superior procurement? Is it the fact that we have a great load that allows us better procurement rates? We're certainly not the largest CCA. I know Monica is terrific. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Bruce is comparing to two utilities, right? Sonoma and Marin. Both of them are older than us. They've been around longer. And so when they've purchased renewable power, et cetera, they've just purchased it at higher prices than we have. So, you know, when you have a product that has a declining price, just like solar was declining,
Sure.
rooftop solar.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just when you jumped into the market, really. And so I'd say that would be the majority of the reason.
So your guess would be Monterey Bay and Peninsula Clean Energy might have similar.
Much closer to us, correct.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you find any data of interest in response to Mr. Yulo's question, I would be interested in that information as well. So I'd ask that you share it.
Okay, will do.
Anything else? Okay, then we'll move forward with the strategic plan update.
Okay, Andrea's going to pull up a slide. I'll see if I can get this done in 90 seconds, which is going to be a short update. All of you had a look at this in the previous exec committee, and then go to the next slide, please. And then we discussed this slide at the board meeting last month, or earlier this month, and there was quite a bit of, there was basically across the board support on it. I just want to remind you that a couple of these issues are not funded yet, and we will be funding it in the budget coming up. We think we'll get you a change in the budget by December. So go to the next slide. I made a couple of changes to our timeline, and I've highlighted those. So basically, I thought this was actually quite a useful process, where instead of showing you the entire strategic plan, which has a lot of work plan and detail in it, just focusing on the bigger picture issues, I thought there was a lot more engagement and discussion with the board this time than in previous years. So I thought, let's roll that into our process, our strategic planning process. And so what you would approve in September is the budget and these strategic focus areas, these 5. So it's kind of really high level. And then we'll update the actual document in the September, it'll come to you in October, and do the same thing next year. So that was the only update I had for you. Whereas previously I was going to bring you the document in September. I'll be bringing you the document in October this time. That's all I have on the strategic plan update.
Any questions from anybody? Any member of the public wish to comment on this? Seeing no members of the public, any final thoughts from any board members? Thank you for keeping the strategic plan structured and front and center, and I think it'll pay dividends when you get 4 or 5 new board members next year. So if we're done with that, everybody's quiet, so we'll move on. Number 4, which is update on the master service agreements.
Hey, good morning, Chair Miller. Good morning, directors. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. Excuse me, this is an update on the master service agreements for the program, for program admin support. Next slide, please, Andrea. So I'll provide a brief update, and we'd also like to get your input on a potential modification. This is definitely more of an operational operational item, a bit more of an operational item compared to a lot of the weighty discussion, policy and strategy discussion earlier, but we felt it important to briefly run it by you before going to the board with the request. Next slide, please. So by way of background, as you know, the board approved the programs roadmap back in December of 2018. Shortly after, we went out to RFP to bring in third-party partners for program admin support. So specifically partners that could help us out with the design, development, and implementation of the programs identified in the roadmap. The board approved 3 master service agreements in June of 2019, in addition to delegating authority to spend to the CEO to spend up to $1 million through September 30th, 2021. The 3 partners that we had identified and contracted with are SMUD for general admin, just general program admin support, CSE, the Center for Sustainable Energy, and they're specifically supporting our innovation activities, innovation on-ramp in particular, and ADM, which is for evaluation, measurement, and verification support. And so they help us evaluate the entire program's portfolio. Next slide, please. So we've been working with them for the past year, and in short, they've been highly effective and valuable partners for us. SVCE certainly would not have been able to move as quickly as we have in developing a comprehensive programs portfolio without both their expertise and the bandwidth provided by their support. So we've been leveraging them so much that we've actually nearly executed enough task orders to reach the $1 million delegation of authority. The spending rate is higher than we had originally forecast whenever we came to you with the original request for a couple reasons. One is we've been moving more quickly, which is kind of a good thing, good problem. The second is we've been leveraging ADM, not just for the programs portfolio, but we also tapped them as well for evaluation support of the $10 million CRCR programs, which is a significant amount of additional spending. Next slide, please. In that case, we would like to understand what the executive committee feedback might be if we were to move forward with a request to increase the delegation of authority from 1 million to 2.5 million and extend the contract terms from the end of September to the end of December 2022. The proposal would have no fiscal impact, no incremental fiscal impact. All of the spending that's happening under these master service agreements are within the board approved budget for programs. And furthermore, each individual program is approved by the board, the allocation of budget for each individual program. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions about this potential request.
I just have a very basic question, which is, when do we actually reset and start back over at 0? We're changing the dollar amount and we're extending the terms. And if this is the strategy, in 2040, we'll be extending the contract from 45 million to 46 million in the term to, 2042. When there's sort of a reset and say, okay, we're gonna look at this from the ground up.
Yeah, so I think originally we had intended to be able to leverage these partners at least for a couple years for all of our program admin support, 2 to 3 years, because we carried out a pretty extensive RFP process, and as you know, that takes a lot of time and staff resources. We had a great response. It was very competitive, and we're very happy with kind of the selections made. And so we had anticipated that RFP would kind of have a 2 to 3-ish year shelf life, so to speak, such that after that point in time, after the spending and after that term is sunset, then we would start over. Like we would issue an RFP maybe 6 months in advance of that. But at the current spending rate, effectively, we'd have to go out to RFP now. And we just did one last year. And so I think certainly the intent is to not extend this indefinitely by any means, but we did anticipate that it would last us a little bit longer than it had.
Okay. Liz, you had a question?
I did actually. Those of us that have the gray hair from being around a bit may recall, I'm pretty sure it was Jeannie Bruins, that this question of contract renewal after renewal after renewal came up. And I'm pretty sure there's a board policy someplace that says that they cannot go beyond 5 years or something like that. So staff may want to back check my memory. But for exactly what you're speaking to, Howard, we didn't want to have contracts just be extended ad infinitum.
Liz, this is Girish. I'm totally with you on that. I will check on the policy. However, just my practice has been, somewhere between 3 to 5 years, you have to go out again. So that is just something I've come in with. But if there's an existing policy, that'll be even better.
Rod?
Yeah, thanks. If we extend these contracts, what effectively is our overhead in program administration? What fraction of the dollars that we allocate go toward administering the programs as opposed to direct value to end customers?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but that is something we could certainly calculate and come back to you on. I think another thing to keep in mind, some of the programs that we're running now are very much in the market transformation category and involve like a lot of contractor support, et cetera. And so in that case, can be a bit trickier to kind of tease out overhead costs. Like it's more straightforward if it's a rebate program, of course. But I can certainly get back to you.
Sure. So but if it is a money we're spending on training, you'd think that the people directly involved in producing that training, delivering the training could count, whereas the folks that are counting the beans and looking at program effectiveness and all would be, I don't want to use it. Overhead, right? So that's not pejorative. I'm just curious. And I guess the other question is there a reason, I guess that you're giving delegation authority. I guess the other way to do this would simply be to bring these proposals to the board, and normally they would be handled on consent, right?
So the current structure, we brought master service agreements to the board, and so the contracts to the board in June of last year. And the work that we carry out with SMUD, ADM, and CSC is on a task order basis. And so for each new program or each new scope of work, we spin up a task order. If we did not want to extend that framework or the authority, then yes, you're right. We would basically have to contract again for each program. And we do that for some programs that don't fit well under our current MSA, for instance, that requires some specialized expertise, like Integral Group, their support for the Building Decarb Joint Action Plan. We did a dedicated RFP for that and brought a contract to the board for review. So that is the alternative. So
I think if I may add to the answer, Amy, we are planning on bringing this to the board on consent in September. So Rod, I think you asked about that. Right. Yes, it will be brought to the board in September.
I guess my feedback is that for this kind of money going to administration, you probably have to, for my taste, you probably need to tell a little bit more of a complete story.
Can I just maybe try this a little different way? And yes, sure. We'll do what you want. But essentially, I think maybe delegation authority is not the key point here. It's extending a contract.
Okay.
That's all we're doing. We're just saying, can we extend our contract, which would have expired September 30, 2021, with the same vendor for 15 months, essentially. And that extension, we're going to add $1.5 million to that extension.
And basically what I mean, to put this into some context, your run rate for these contracts has gone up a little bit due to our pandemic relief program, right? That's what I heard, that ADM, we're using ADM more than we were. So some context like that, talking about the fact that basically we're continuing these contracts rather than reletting them in the interest of efficiency. And if I'm understanding correctly, plus because of because of the pandemic, we're doing more work than we had anticipated when we originally let them, right? So that might be
Perfect.
the context that would be helpful.
Yep. Can easily do
Okay.
that. Yep.
Thank you. I spent time with Amy yesterday going through the E3 slides that were part of the IRP, and was so impressed. I was befuddled by them, and I will say that she had answers for every question and more that I had. It was a very interesting session. I'm so impressed with the work of our programs team. Thank you.
I think we're pretty
Thank you.
comfortable that we are very much kicking it on this regard. But you know, Grish, we look at it, it's like, oh, there's more than a year and $1.5 million. But I think we'll just get everybody comfortable with what we're doing with that. Are there other
Completely.
questions?
Yep. Thank you.
Let me check to see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item. You can indicate that by raising your virtual hand. Seeing none, I'll come back to us. This was really just a discussion. Anybody have any final comments? And I think the strategy that we had and the resources that you guys have pulled together and the accomplishments, honestly, they speak for themselves. But you know, when you ask for $1.5 million in another year, we all go, uh-oh, what are we doing again? I think you'll just get over that small hurdle, but the work and what's transpired has been exceptional. So thank you for all that. Okay, so our last item, item 5, we want to tweak our 20-day paid off. It was for COVID. Is this you, Grish?
Thank you. So we've had several employees who have been impacted by the fires, and they've had to evacuate. And just overall, right? So in the days leading up to the fires, it's prep, it's the kids, it's the family, it's just, and even today, this last week, we have 3 of our employees. 1 has left with the family to Oregon. 2 are now living with family outside their home. For several days, one of the employees was not sure if their home was going to be safe. So all of this, right, it takes time, and it's real time. So what we are proposing is the 20 days of PTO that is painted a different color just for COVID-related issues. We'd like to use that same 20 days to offer our employees who are impacted by fires this emergency, to take that time off without using their vacation sick time. And of course, this would be applicable going back to August during the fire. So there's going to be backdated essentially, so to allow them that flexibility. So that's what we wanted to propose to you. Yeah, so love your feedback on whether you think it makes sense and if you think other changes need to be made.
Okay, anybody have questions on this? Not seeing any hands. Let me go to the public and ask if any member of the public wishes to comment on this. Not seeing anybody raising those virtual hands, so I got to come back to us. I know it's a discussion, Grish, but I think you want more than just us to ask random questions. You really want to know what we're thinking. Mm-hmm. And so I press my fellow board members.
Well, I can speak to it.
Yeah, please, Liz.
I'm not raising my hand anymore.
In this group, I don't worry about it. Everybody's on the screen. I'm good.
Good. Thank you. So no, I think it's an appropriate path to take for flexibility. I think it's consistent with the support and attitude of the board for the whole COVID discussion, and consistent with the support of the board for staff as a whole. And I do think that we need to be prepared for more difficult times and being flexible. So I appreciate the recommendation to expand and be more flexible with that 20 hours that's already been approved.
Yeah, it's 20 days.
20 days, sorry.
Yep. Thank you. Really appreciate your support.
Rod and then Nancy.
Yeah, I'm supportive of as well. It's pretty obvious to me, and I appreciate your initiative, Girish.
Nancy?
Yeah, to Liz's implication that there will be maybe more disasters heading our way and flexibility is a benefit. I'm wondering if there is a time limit on this, or is it sort of a permanent policy moving forward? And should we consolidate the name of it to something different?
That's a great question. I need to look at the resolution. I think the previous resolution, we extended, initially when we did the COVID one, it was for 3 months. Then we extended it, I want to say through December of this year. So what I would like to do is actually extend it through September of next year. And then also take direction from you right now to kind of bring it back as to say, okay, what kind of permanent policy would we want to adopt around this, basically around emergency situations, right? If that's okay with you, we'll present to the board for the September meeting, have a new date, and then also come back to the exec committee, maybe in a quarter. We are also looking at our new benefits year, which starts in February. So we'll be bringing you the finance committee and the exec committee, some ideas on some cost neutral changes to the benefits, which would help with some individual employee situations without adding to our costs. So we could bring it back to you in that context, Jim.
I think it's okay to specifically call out the pandemic and the wildfires. I mean, if there's another emergency, we could add it, but I think it from my perspective, right, it helps to name these things, because I think if this ain't any old emergency, these are specific things that are rocking, shaking our world.
Don't say that, Rod. The earthquake is the only thing we haven't had yet.
No, the only thing, well, yes, we could have that. And then, of course, there could be the Russian invasion on our election day to secure the ballot boxes for a certain president.
So moving on, I agree with having specific labels, as Rod just indicated, but Nancy, I actually think you brought up a good point. Perhaps we need to define when the 20 days stops and starts. Is it for our fiscal year, or is it for our benefits year? So I think that would be a good clarification. When you look at the resolution, Girish, you might want to word it to tie it to, I'm thinking our fiscal year, but I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, we'll take both great ideas of, I think, naming it specifically, and so we'll change the resolution to name it specifically. My thinking right now, I'll talk to Dawn Rhodes and Kevin. But I think end of the fiscal year would be a natural end date. And since we're bringing this in with the budget, the same time period, I think September 2021 would be a kind of, that's what I'd probably propose.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So on this specifically naming, it seems like we should be proactive given where we live, and we should just add earthquake onto the list. Because I don't want to wait till we have an earthquake and then you're coming back to the board to amend it to say earthquakes.
Yep. We'll do that. We'll have some. We'll also have. It's essentially emergencies, right? These natural disaster,
Act of God.
act of God kind of things that you can't really predict. So we'll put our heads together to name what we know, and then have some additional general language too.
So we'll add plague, locust, and earthquake. No,
And
okay.
PSPS events.
Yeah, this sounds interesting. So let me double check with the public, see if any member of the public wishes to speak on this item. Tony's got his hand up. If we could bring Tony on.
I wanted to comfort Chair Miller and let him know that we did receive a notification this week from the state that we have an infestation of oriental fruit flies in our community that are going to require them to spray and take action. So maybe we've covered the locust for the year in South County here. Thanks.
It's one of those things, and everybody on this call has been mayor at some point or another, and things happen to you for which you have no control. And this has been the most out of control year ever. So it's been a joy being the mayor. Are there any other comments? I'm seeing none. I think you got what you need there, Garish.
Yes, thank you very much for your support, board.
Okay. I got to say, hopefully our staff is feeling that we are super supportive, and I'm glad we're looking at the benefits, which you foreshadowed. Always good to make sure we're providing the benefits and the stuff that our employees value. Because changing the world is a demanding profession to be in, and make sure that people have the support they need. Okay, so that's it on that item. Next up is committee and staff remarks. Does anybody have anything to say? It is a spare the air day, and we just have to blame whoever's in charge of the Air Resources Board for that. Hopefully these fires will end soon. And that's all I think we have for today. Okay, then I think we're just going to call the meeting adjourned. I want to thank you guys, as always, for being so efficient and prepared for the meeting.